The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wide enough to hold 1,000 beings. Crystal pillars rose from the floor, glowing with soft blue light. Representatives from 5 major species sat in a perfect circle, discussing matters that affected billions of lives across 47 star systems. Ambassador Thelvas of the Valkyrie stood at the center. His tall, thin body seemed to shimmer as he spoke without moving his mouth. The Valkyrie communicated through telepathy, projecting thoughts directly into the minds of others. Today his thoughts carried worry. The attacks continue, Thelvas projected. 17 trade ships lost in the past month. The pirates grow bolder. They strike our supply routes and disappear before our patrols arrive. War Chief Drakmor of the Krathnoon laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber. The Krathnoon were massive warriors covered in thick scales and natural armor. Drakmor stood nearly 8 feet tall, his red eyes gleaming with confidence. Pirates are insects, Drakmor growled. My fleets will crush them. The Krathnoon fear nothing in this galaxy. The Zephron representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with calm light. Violence is not always the answer, War Chief. Perhaps we should investigate the source of these attacks. An Ashiri diplomat, small and bird-like with iridescent feathers, chirped softly. The Zephrons speak wisdom. We must understand our enemy before we act. From the shadows of the chamber, an old Toral scholar named Peltara shuffled forward. The Toral resembled ancient tortoises, with wrinkled skin and shells that held data cores containing thousands of years of knowledge. Peltara's voice crackled with age. I have found something in the old texts, Peltara said slowly. References to a species that once existed in the forgotten sectors. They called themselves humans. The chamber fell silent for a moment, then several council members began to laugh. Humans are myths, Drakmor snorted. Stories to frighten children. No such species exists, Peltara shook his head. The text described them in detail. They survived without hive minds. They lived on a death world with extreme weather and dangerous predators. They fought among themselves constantly, yet somehow they reached the stars. Impossible, the Zephron said. A species that fights itself cannot achieve space travel. Logic prevents it. The texts also say they possessed strange traits, Peltara continued. They refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. They adapted to any environment. They felt emotion so strongly that it drove them to acts of great creation and terrible destruction. Thelvas projected confusion. How can a species function without telepathic links? How do they coordinate? How do they understand each other? The texts do not say, Peltara admitted. Perhaps that is why they remain myths. Such beings could not exist in reality. The council dismissed the topic and returned to discussing the pirate attacks. None of them knew that far away, in a hidden section of space that no council ship had visited in 200 years. Humanity was very much alive. Commander Lisa Grant stood in the command center of Haven Station, humanity's largest hidden outpost. The station orbited a dead moon in a system that appeared empty on all galactic charts. Lisa was 38 years old with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She studied the holographic display floating before her, showing ship movements throughout council space. The Krathnoon are moving more ships toward Valkyrie territory, said Captain Jake Morrison standing beside her. Jake was younger, 32, with an easy smile that hid a tactical mind as sharp as any in the human fleet. These aren't pirate attacks. This is a military operation disguised as random raids. Lisa nodded slowly. They're testing response times, measuring the council's defensive capabilities. They're preparing for war. Dr. Helen Wade, the station's lead scientist and historian, looked up from her console. At 45, Helen had devoted her life to studying alien species from a distance. If the Krathnoon attack the Valkyrie, the entire council will fracture. The other species will take sides. We could be looking at a galactic war. That's not our problem, said Lieutenant Sam Carter from the weapons station. At 27, Sam was the youngest senior officer, but his skill with military systems was unmatched. We stay hidden. That's always been the plan. Lisa walked to the large window overlooking the dark side of the moon. 200 years ago, humanity had made first contact with an alien race. It had gone badly. The aliens had seen humans as primitive and dangerous. The war that followed nearly destroyed Earth. Humanity had survived by disappearing, hiding in the dark corners of space, rebuilding in secret. For 2 centuries they had watched the Galactic Council from the shadows, learning everything while revealing nothing. Admiral Cross wants to see you, Jake said quietly. Lisa found Admiral Vincent Cross in his office, staring at the same data she had been reviewing. At 56, Cross had gray hair and the tired eyes of someone who carried heavy responsibilities. He had been a young pilot during the First Contact War. He remembered the burning cities and the desperate evacuation of Earth. "We can't stay hidden forever," Cross said without turning around. "Sooner or later someone will find us. Better to reveal ourselves on our terms." "The Council thinks we're myths," Lisa replied. "We have an advantage in that. An advantage we're about to lose." Cross finally turned to face her. "I'm sending you to the Council. Take 3 ships. The Defiant, the Valiant, and the Resolute. Show them that humans are real. Warn them about the Krathnoon. Offer our help." Lisa felt her heart race. "Sir, if we do this, there's no going back. We expose ourselves to every species in known space." "I know." Cross's voice was heavy. "But if we do nothing, millions will die in a war we could have prevented. What kind of species hides while others suffer? That's not who we are." Lisa thought about all the years of hiding. She thought about the children born on Haven Station who had never seen Earth. She thought about the risks of revealing humanity to species that might see them as threats. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow." Cross handed her a data chip. "This contains all our evidence against the Krathnoon. Make them listen, Lisa. Make them understand that humans aren't myths. We're real and we're here to help." That night, Lisa stood in the hangar bay watching crews prepare the 3 ships. Each vessel was small compared to Council warships, built for speed and stealth rather than raw power. The human fleet had been designed for hiding and running. Now they would use these ships to step into the light. Jake found her there, having second thoughts. "Thousands of them," Lisa admitted. "But the Admiral is right. We can't hide forever. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that humans are more than just old stories." The next morning, 3 human ships left Haven Station and set course for the Galactic Council chambers. Inside, Lisa Grant prepared the words that would change everything. Humanity was about to remind the galaxy of a simple truth. Myths sometimes walk among the living, and legends can bleed. The journey would take 3 days. In that time, the Krathnoon would launch their attack and the galaxy would begin to burn. But humanity was coming, carrying hope in their hands and determination in their hearts. The Council had called them a myth for 2 centuries. They were about to learn the truth. The alarm screamed through the Velkari colony of Shendal just before dawn. The first missile struck the central residential tower, and the building collapsed in a cloud of dust and fire. Thousands of Velkari civilians died in seconds, their telepathic screams echoing across space to their homeworld. More missiles followed. The Krathnoon warships emerged from nowhere, their weapons tearing through the peaceful colony with brutal efficiency. By the time the attack ended, 50,000 Velkari were dead. The Krathnoon fleet departed without explanation, leaving only destruction behind. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within hours. The chamber buzzed with anger and confusion. Ambassador Thelva stood in the center, his telepathic projection filled with grief and rage. "The Krathnoon have committed an act of war," Thelvis declared. "They murdered my people without warning, without cause. We demand justice." War Chief Drakmor remained seated, his massive arms crossed. "The Krathnoon did not attack your colony. You have no proof. We have recordings," the Zephron representative pulsed. "Krathnoon ships. Krathnoon weapons. The evidence is clear." "False evidence," Drakmor growled. "Anyone could paint their ships to look like ours. The Krathnoon do not hide behind cowardly sneak attacks. When we make war, we do it with honor." The Ashiri diplomat spread her wings in distress. "The Council must respond. We cannot allow such violence to stand." The Toral scholar Peltara spoke slowly. "War will solve nothing. We must investigate further." "Investigation takes time," Thelvis projected coldly. "Time for the Krathnoon to prepare their next attack." "No, we will defend ourselves." The Velkari fleet is mobilizing. The Council chamber erupted in arguments. Species took sides. The careful peace that had lasted 3,000 years began to crack. The Zephrons called for calm. The Esheri pleaded for diplomacy. But the Velkari demanded blood and the Krathnoon seemed ready to give it. Then the room fell silent. Every screen in the chamber went dark. Every holographic display flickered and died. The lights dimmed. When they came back on, 3 ships hung in the viewing space outside the council chamber. Ships that appeared on no registry, ships that seemed to have materialized from empty space. A human voice spoke through the chamber's speakers, clear and steady. Galactic Council. My name is Commander Lisa Grant of the Earth Defense Force. Humanity requests permission to address this assembly. The chamber exploded in confusion. The Zephyron representative pulsed rapidly. Impossible. Nothing can penetrate our security systems. Lieutenant Amy Rogers, sitting at the communications station aboard the Defiant, smiled. At 29, she had spent her career breaking supposedly unbreakable systems. Their security is good, she said to Lisa. But humans have been watching their networks for 200 years. We know all the back doors. On the council chamber floor, Peltara shuffled forward, his ancient eyes wide. Humans, the myths are real. We're very real, Lisa said, her image appearing on the main screen. She wore a simple blue uniform with Earth's flag on the shoulder. We've been watching the council for a long time. We know about the attacks on your trade routes. We know the Krath Noon are behind them. We have proof. Drakmor rose to his full height, his voice a roar. You dare accuse the Krath Noon? Show me this myth species that hides in the dark and whispers lies. We don't whisper, Jake Morrison said, standing beside Lisa on the screen. And we're not hiding anymore. Lisa transmitted the data. Recordings of Krath Noon commanders planning attacks. Communications logs showing orders from Drakmor himself. Financial records proving the Krath Noon had been secretly building a war fleet, twice the size of what the council knew about. Drakmor's red eyes blazed with fury. Lies! Fabrications! I challenge these humans to prove they are warriors and not cowards who hide behind false data. Admiral Cross's voice came through the channel, calm and measured. We accept your challenge, War Chief. Name your terms. The Zephyron representative tried to intervene. This is not necessary. We can resolve this through discussion. No, Thelvas projected. Let the humans prove themselves. If they speak truth, they must be willing to fight for it. Drakmor's mouth twisted into a cruel smile. A simple test. Your best pilots against mine. A combat simulation. When my warriors crush your little ships, we will see how real these myths truly are. Agreed, Lisa said without hesitation. 3 of your pilots against 3 of ours. Standard simulation parameters. 1 hour later, the simulation began. The council watched on screens throughout the chamber. The Krath Noon pilots flew heavy attack ships, powerful and well-armed. Captain Jake Morrison led the human team in light fighters, fast and maneuverable. The battle started exactly as everyone expected. The Krath Noon ships charged forward in a tight formation, firing massive volleys. Jake's team scattered in 3 different directions. The Krath Noon commander laughed over the open channel. They run! The myths flee like prey. Then the human ships doubled back. Instead of attacking from a distance, they dove straight toward the Krath Noon formation. The alien pilots, trained for long-range combat, suddenly found human fighters weaving between them at point-blank range. Jake's ship spun sideways, firing at angles that should have been impossible. His wingman, Lieutenant Sam Carter, used the Krath Noon ships as shields, making them hit each other when they fired. The 3rd human pilot, Sergeant Paul Bennett, simply rammed his ship into a Krath Noon vessel's engine port. In the simulation, both ships exploded, but the move took the enemy's strongest fighter out of the battle. Sorry about your ship, Paul's voice crackled, but it worked. Within 5 minutes, all 3 Krath Noon ships were disabled. The human fighters hadn't fought with honor or followed any standard tactics. They had fought to win by any means necessary. They had fought like humans. The council chamber sat in stunned silence. Drakmor's face twisted with rage. Cheating. They violated combat protocols. There were no protocols specified, the Zephyron noted. The humans simply fought in a way you didn't expect. Lisa's image reappeared on the screen. War Chief Drakmor, we have more evidence to present. Would you like to continue calling us liars? Before Drakmor could respond, alarms sounded throughout the council station. Chief Engineer Marcus Lee's voice came through urgently. Commander, we're detecting multiple Krath Noon warships dropping out of hyperspace. Lots of them. They're surrounding the station. On the viewing screens, 200 Krath Noon vessels appeared, weapons charged and ready. Drakmor stood tall, his voice filling the chamber. The time for games has ended. The Krath Noon will no longer bow to this weak council. We will rule and the other species will serve. Starting now. The Krath Noon ships opened fire on the council defense fleet. Energy weapons lit up space as shields flared and ships exploded. The Council's security forces fought back, but they were outnumbered and unprepared. Lisa made a decision in seconds. All human ships engage the enemy. Protect the Council station. There are only 3 of us, Sam Carter said. Then we'd better make them count, Jake replied, already moving the Defiant into attack position. The 3 human ships dove into the battle. They were tiny compared to the massive Krathnoon warships, but they moved like angry wasps, striking at weak points, targeting weapon systems and shield generators. Where the Council ships fought with careful formations, the humans fought with chaos and improvisation. The Valiant, commanded by Marcus Lee, flew straight through the gap between 2 Krathnoon destroyers, firing at both simultaneously. The Resolute, under Paul Bennett, used the debris from destroyed ships as cover, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Jake's Defiant led a wounded Council cruiser to safety, taking fire meant for the larger ship. His shields failed and his hull began to crack. Lisa watched the damage reports with her heart in her throat. Jake, pull back. Not yet, Jake said calmly. He aimed his dying ship at the nearest Krathnoon destroyer's bridge and accelerated. At the last second, he ejected in an escape pod. The Defiant crashed into the destroyer and both ships erupted in flames. The Krathnoon attack faltered. They had expected an easy victory, not desperate resistance. More Council ships arrived as reinforcements. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Drakmor watched his perfect plan falling apart. With a roar of frustration, he ordered his fleet to retreat. The surviving Krathnoon ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving their dead behind. In the Council chamber, security forces surrounded Drakmor. The warchief tried to fight, but even his strength couldn't overcome the combined power of the guards. They dragged him away in chains. Ambassador Thelvis projected thoughts toward the 2 remaining human ships. You saved us. Myths are not supposed to save the living. Lisa's voice came through tired but strong. We're not myths, Ambassador. We're just people trying to do what's right. The galaxy is big enough for all of us, the Ashiri diplomat chirped softly. Will you come inside the station? The Council wishes to meet these humans properly. Lisa looked at the wreckage floating in space, at Jake's escape pod being recovered by the Resolute, at the Council ships limping back to dock. Yes, she said. We'll come inside. It's time we introduced ourselves. As the human crew prepared to dock, Amy Rogers looked at her commander. What happens now? Lisa smiled slightly. Now we find out if they're ready to accept that. Velkar Prime hung in space like a blue jewel, the homeworld of the telepathic Velkari. 7 billion beings lived on the planet below, their minds linked in a vast network of thoughts and dreams. The world had known peace for centuries. That peace died when 300 Krathnoon warships emerged from hyperspace and surrounded the planet. The Krathnoon commander broadcast a simple message. Surrender or die. You have 1 hour. Ambassador Thelvis stood in the Planetary Defense Center, feeling the terror of his people washing through the telepathic network like ice water. The Velkari defense fleet consisted of 40 ships. The Council had dispatched reinforcements, but they were still 2 days away. 110 ships against 300. The mathematics were brutal and clear. We cannot win this fight, the defense commander projected to Thelvis. We should evacuate who we can and surrender. No, the voice came from behind them. Lisa Grant walked into the command center, flanked by Jake Morrison and Dr. Helen Wade. The humans had been given quarters on Velkar Prime after the Council incident. You don't surrender. You fight. Easy words from someone whose world is not under threat, the defense commander projected coldly. Lisa met his mental touch without flinching. My world was under threat once. We fought, we lost. But we survived because we never gave up. She turned to Thelvis. How long until the Krathnoon attack? 43 minutes. Then we have 43 minutes to prepare. Lisa activated her communication device. Admiral Cross, what's our fleet status? The Admiral's voice crackled through. I've pulled every available ship from Haven Station. 12 vessels total. We'll be there in 30 minutes. 12 human ships. 12 against 300. The Velkari defense commander would have laughed if the situation wasn't so desperate. This is suicide. Maybe, Jake said with a slight smile. But we're pretty good at making suicide look heroic. Lisa pulled up a holographic display of the planet and the surrounding space. The Krathnoon fight with overwhelming force. They rely on superior numbers and firepower. They're predictable. Being predictable doesn't Matter when you have 300 ships. The defense commander pointed out. It matters if you know what they're going to do before they do. Lisa began marking positions on the display. We split our forces. The human fleet will hit their supply ships at the back of the formation. While they turn to face us, your ships attack their command vessels. We keep them turning, keep them confused, never let them focus their full strength on one target. That's not a battle plan. That's barely organized chaos. Lisa grinned. Welcome to human military doctrine. Admiral Cross arrived with the human fleet as promised. 12 small ships against an armada. The Krathnoon commander noticed them but didn't bother to respond. What could 12 ships do? He was about to find out. The battle began with the human ships splitting into 4 groups. Lisa commanded one group from a ship called the Defiant II. Jake led another. Marcus Lee, the chief engineer who turned out to be a skilled pilot, commanded a third. Sergeant Paul Bennett led the 4th group, which included Marine boarding teams. They hit the Krathnoon supply ships first, destroying 3 before the enemy even realized they were under attack. The massive Krathnoon warships turned to face the human threat, opening fire with enough weapons to vaporize a moon. But the human ships weren't there anymore. They had already moved, striking at a different section of the formation. They're like insects, the Krathnoon commander snarled. Swat them down! But insects are hard to swat when they move unpredictably. The human ships dove through gaps in the Krathnoon formation, using the enemy's own vessels as shields. They targeted specific systems, not trying to destroy the massive warships but crippling their weapons, their shields, their communications. Meanwhile, the Velkari fleet attacked the command ships. The Krathnoon formation began to lose cohesion. Ships received conflicting orders. Some moved to defend the supply lines. Others chased the human fighters. The perfect military formation became a confused mess. Lieutenant Amy Rogers worked from the Defiant II's communication station, hacking into Krathnoon networks. She broadcast false orders, sent ships to the wrong locations, and generally made the enemy commanders question every message they received. Dr. Helen Wade had spent the past week working with Taural scientists. Together they had created a computer virus designed to disrupt Krathnoon navigation systems. When Amy uploaded it to the enemy network, dozens of Krathnoon ships suddenly found their instruments showing wrong coordinates. Several ships collided with each other trying to maneuver. On the planet below, Paul Bennett led a ground team to evacuate Velkari civilians from cities that the Krathnoon were threatening to bombard. His team of 30 Marines moved through the streets, guiding thousands of frightened Velkari to shelter. The Krathnoon sent ground troops to attack the evacuation. Paul's team held them off. We're outnumbered 10-1. One of his Marines said, firing at approaching Krathnoon soldiers. Then we'd better make them think we're 20-1, Paul replied. He rigged explosive charges around the evacuation zone, creating walls of fire that made the human positions look more defended than they were. It was all bluff and misdirection, but it worked. The Krathnoon ground forces pulled back to regroup. In space, the battle reached a critical point. The Krathnoon commander finally organized his scattered forces and focused them on the human ships. Jake's fighter took direct hits, his shields failing. Warning alarms screamed in his cockpit. His engines were dying. Jake, eject, Lisa shouted over the communication channel. Jake looked at the massive Krathnoon flagship ahead of him. Its shield generator was exposed, damaged by an earlier attack. If that generator went down, the Council ships could break through and hit the flagship directly. But his weapons were offline. He had no way to destroy it except one. Tell my story right, Jake said calmly. He accelerated his dying ship toward the flagship, putting every last bit of power into the engines. The Krathnoon tried to shoot him down, but his ship was too small, too fast and too close. Jake ejected at the last possible second, and his ship slammed into the shield generator. The explosion tore through the flagship's defenses. The shields collapsed. The Velkari fleet seized the opportunity, firing everything they had at the exposed vessel. The flagship's hull ruptured. Atmosphere vented into space. The ship began to break apart. Sam Carter, flying nearby in his fighter, scooped up Jake's escape pod. You're insane, you know that? Jake's voice came through, breathless but laughing. Did it work? See for yourself. The Krathnoon formation was collapsing. Without their flagship, without their supply ships, with their communications in chaos and their navigation compromised, the mighty armada became a collection of confused, isolated vessels. The Council reinforcements arrived at that moment, 200 fresh ships dropping out of hyperspace. The Krathnoon commander, aboard a backup command ship, realized he had lost. His perfect attack had been destroyed by 12 small ships and a defending fleet that refused to give up. He ordered the retreat. The surviving Krathnoon vessels jumped to hyperspace, abandoning their dead. The Battle of Velkar Prime was over. Humanity had won its first major engagement as part of the galactic community. But the victory came at a cost. 3 human ships had been destroyed. 47 crew members were dead. The Velkari had lost 12 ships and thousands of civilians in the cities the Krathnoon had managed to bombard. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Defiant 2, watching the damaged ships limping back to the planet. Her hands were shaking. She had commanded in battle before, in small skirmishes against pirates during humanity's hidden years, but nothing like this, nothing on this scale. Ambassador Thelvas's mental touch reached out to her, gentle and filled with gratitude. "You saved my world. How can the Velkari repay such a debt?" "You don't owe us anything," Lisa said quietly. "We did what anyone should do. We helped." "The Council was wrong about humans," Thelvas projected. "You are not myths. You are not primitive. You are warriors of the highest honor." Jake, his arm in a medical brace, stood beside Lisa. "We're not warriors. We're just people who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "No," Helen Wade said, joining them on the bridge. She had been monitoring communications during the battle, watching how the different species fought. "We're humans, and that means something different than any of them expected. They saw our small ships and weak shields. They didn't understand that our real strength is that we don't know when to quit." Below on Velkar Prime, Paul Bennett and his Marines helped Velkari families return to their homes. The civilians kept touching the humans, not telepathically but physically, needing to confirm that these strange beings were real. Children who had been taught that humans were legends stared in wonder at the tired, dirty Marines. One small Velkari child projected a simple thought to Paul. "Are you really from the myth world?" Paul knelt down to the child's level. "Earth isn't a myth. It's real. And humans aren't legends. We're just folks who care about our neighbors no matter what planet they're from." That night, the Velkari held a ceremony of remembrance for the fallen. Both Velkari and human dead were honored. For the first time in the Galactic Council chambers had never been so crowded. Representatives from all 5 major species filled the space, along with diplomats from dozens of minor worlds. Everyone wanted to witness the historic vote. The question was simple, but carried enormous weight. Should humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council? Ambassador Nicole Harper stood at the center of the chamber, representing humanity for the first time in an official capacity. At 50 years old, she had spent most of her life preparing for this moment. She wore a simple gray suit with Earth's flag on the collar. Her gray hair was tied back, and her blue eyes studied the faces around her with calm assessment. The Velkari spoke first. Ambassador Thelvas projected his thoughts clearly. "The Velkari owe our existence to humanity. They fought for us when they had no obligation. They lost lives defending our world. We vote yes. Humanity deserves a place among the stars." The Ashiri diplomat spread her colorful wings. "The Ashiri have studied these humans. They show compassion, courage, and honor. They fight not for conquest but for protection. We also vote yes." The Toral scholar Peltara shuffled forward slowly. The ancient texts spoke of humans, but words on a page cannot capture reality. I have seen humans fight. I have seen them sacrifice. I have seen them refuse to abandon the innocent. The Toral vote yes with one concern. Humans are chaotic. They do not follow established patterns. This troubles us. "Chaos can be dangerous," agreed the Zephron representative, pulsing with amber light. "We Zephrons value order, logic, and predictability. Humans possess none of these qualities. They act on emotion. They take risks that no logical being would consider. They change their minds without warning. How can we trust a species that even their own members cannot predict?" The chamber buzzed with debate. Nicole waited patiently, knowing this was the critical moment. Finally, the Zephron asked her directly, "Ambassador Harper, can you explain why the Council should accept such an unpredictable species?" Nicole took a breath and began to speak. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber, translated into every language and telepathic format. You're right to be concerned about chaos. Humans are chaotic. We argue among ourselves constantly. We have fought wars on our own world for thousands of years. We make mistakes, we act on emotion. We take risks that seem insane to logical minds. She paused. But that chaos is also our strength. How can chaos be strength? The Zephron asked, genuinely curious. Because the universe is chaotic, Nicole replied. You've built an ordered society and that's admirable. But when something happens that doesn't fit your careful patterns, you struggle to adapt. Humans live in chaos. We're comfortable with it. When the unexpected happens, we don't freeze. We react. We improvise. We find solutions that no one planned for. She activated a holographic display. Let me tell you about Earth's history. 5,000 years ago, we lived in caves. 3,000 years ago, we built cities. 1,000 years ago, we discovered electricity. 500 years ago, we reached space. We progressed faster than any species in council records. Not because we're smarter, not because we're stronger, but because when we hit a wall, we don't carefully analyze the wall. We knock it down, climb over it, dig under it, or go around it. Whatever works, the Ashiri chirped softly. That sounds exhausting, Nicole smiled. It is. Being human is exhausting. We feel everything so intensely. Joy, sorrow, anger, love. Those emotions drive us to create art and music and stories. They also drive us to protect those we care about, even if we've only known them for a short time. The Velkari are not your people, Peltara observed. Yet you fought for them as if they were. They're sentient beings who needed help, Nicole said simply. That makes them our people. All conscious life is connected. We're all trying to survive in a vast, often hostile universe. Why wouldn't we help each other? Before the Zephron could respond, alarms blared through the station. The Council's long-range sensors had detected something. An emergency transmission played on every screen. A desperate voice cried out from a remote mining colony. This is Colony 7, we're under attack, unknown vessels. They're not trying to disable us, they're trying to kill us. Everyone. They're killing everyone. Please, someone help us, please. The transmission ended in static. The council chamber fell silent. The defense commander brought up sensor data. The attack happened 40 minutes ago. The colony is gone. No survivors. But we're detecting the attacking fleet. They're heading toward council space. The screens showed images of the attacking ships. They were like nothing anyone had seen before. Organic vessels that seemed to be grown rather than built. They pulsed with dark energy. They moved with purpose. A new species, the Zephron said quietly. Unknown to council records. Not entirely unknown, Peltara said, his voice heavy. The old texts mention them. The Scorn. A hive-minded species that consumes all biological matter in their path. They appeared once before, thousands of years ago. The ancient civilizations barely drove them back. Admiral Cross's voice came through from the human fleet. How long until they reach populated systems? 3 weeks, the defense commander answered. Maybe less. The council dissolved into panic. Their fleet was still recovering from the Krath-Noon conflict. Ships were damaged, crews were tired, and now a new enemy approached, one that according to the old texts had nearly destroyed the ancient galaxy. We should evacuate the border worlds, the Ashiri suggested. We should fortify our defenses, the Zephron countered. We should understand what we're facing, Peltara said. Admiral Cross made a decision. The human fleet will investigate, will scout the enemy, gather intelligence, and report back. That's suicide, the defense commander said. We don't know their capabilities. Then we'll find out, Lisa Grant said, standing beside the admiral in the transmission. Someone has to. Colonel Ryan Foster, a special operations commander, assembled a team within hours. At 44, Ryan had led countless missions during humanity's hidden years. He was calm, methodical, and absolutely fearless. His team consisted of 20 Marines, including Paul Bennett, who had volunteered immediately. They took 2 ships to Colony 7. The journey was silent. Everyone knew what they would find. The colony had housed 5,000 beings from multiple species. Men, women, children. All dead now. When they arrived, the scene was worse than expected. The colony wasn't just destroyed, it was consumed. The buildings remained, but everything biological was gone. Not burned, not blown apart. Simply absent, as if erased from existence. "Spread out," Ryan ordered. "Look for any survivors, any clue about what happened." They found one survivor in a sealed medical bay. A young Zephyrin child, maybe 10 years old by their species standard. Dr. Sophie Chen, the team's medical officer, treated the child's injuries. At 36, Sophie had seen her share of trauma, but the look in this child's eyes haunted her. "What did you see?" Sophie asked gently. The child's light pulsed weakly. "They came through the walls, like shadows. They touched my mother and she just disappeared, dissolved. They took everyone. Why didn't they take me?" The medical bay was sealed, Sophie realized. They couldn't get through the door. Paul Bennett found the colony's security recordings. They showed the Scorn ships arriving. Creatures emerged, not quite solid, not quite energy. They flowed through the colony like a dark tide, consuming every living thing they touched. The colonists tried to fight, but weapons passed through the Scorn without effect. The attack lasted less than an hour. "They're not just killing," Paul said quietly. "They're feeding." Ryan sent the data back to the Council. "The Scorn are heading toward your space. Thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands. They don't communicate, they don't negotiate, they just consume. The Council fleet won't be enough to stop them." The Council reconvened an emergency session. The evidence was undeniable. A massive threat approached, and they were unprepared. The Zephyron representative dimmed with concern. "Our fleet cannot defend against an enemy we do not understand. We need time to research, to develop new weapons." "We don't have time," Nicole Harper said. "The Scorn will be here in weeks. We need to unite every ship, every species, every resource we have, and we need to do it now." "The Krathnoon will not help us," Thelvis projected. "Not after we imprisoned their war chief." "Then we convince them," Nicole replied. "We make them understand that if the Scorn win, everyone loses. Even the Krathnoon." The Ashiri diplomat spoke softly. "This requires cooperation on a scale we have never achieved. The Council has maintained peace, but we have never truly fought as one." Nicole looked around the chamber at the different species, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, their own fears and hopes. "Then it's time we learned, because the alternative is extinction." The Zephyron finally pulsed with decision. "We vote yes. Humanity has proven they can face the impossible. Perhaps they can teach us to do the same. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Harper." The vote was unanimous. Humanity became the 6th member species of the Galactic Council. But there was no celebration, no ceremony, only the grim knowledge that they had 3 weeks to prepare for a war that would determine the fate of all life in the galaxy. Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of her ship, looking at the sensor readings. The border systems of Council space had been evacuated. 12 worlds emptied of civilians. The combined fleet of the Galactic Council gathered at the edge of known space, facing the darkness where the Scorn would emerge. 500 ships from 6 species, each vessel carrying the hope of billions. Admiral Vincent Cross stood on the bridge of the human flagship Liberty, named for the concept that all species had a right to exist. Beside him stood Velkari Admiral Telmara, a seasoned commander whose mind could coordinate hundreds of telepathic connections simultaneously. The 2 admirals made an odd pair. Cross was old by human standards, gray and tired but unbending. Telmara was young for a Velkari, quick-thinking and adaptable. "The Scorn will outnumber us 10-1, Telmara projected to Cross. "Traditional tactics suggest we cannot win." "Good thing humans don't use traditional tactics," Cross replied. He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All vessels, this is Admiral Cross, I won't lie to you. What's coming is worse than anything the Council has faced in 3,000 years. The Scorn don't want territory. They don't want resources. They want to consume every living thing in this galaxy. If we lose, everyone we care about dies. Our families, our friends, our worlds. Everything ends. He paused, looking at the faces of his crew. Humans, all of them, who had volunteered to stand between the darkness and the light. But here's what the Scorn don't know about this galaxy. They don't know about the Velkari, who can coordinate their thoughts across vast distances. They don't know about the Zephrons, whose technology can adapt on the fly. They don't know about the Toral, who remember every lesson their species ever learned. They don't know about the Ashiri, who can inspire courage in the darkest moments. They don't know about the Krathnoon, who never retreat from a fight. Cross smiled slightly. And they sure as hell don't know about humans, who are too stubborn to understand when they're beaten. We're going to teach the Scorn something today. We're going to teach them that life fights back. The fleet erupted in cheers and battle cries in a dozen languages and telepathic frequencies. For the first time in galactic history, the Council fleet felt like one unified force instead of separate nations pretending to cooperate. Lisa Grant commanded a mixed squadron of ships from all 6 species. It was chaos trying to coordinate different technologies, different languages, and different fighting styles. But somehow it worked. The Velkari pilots could sense what their teammates needed before they asked. The Zephyron ships provided long-range support with their advanced sensors. The humans taught everyone to expect the unexpected and react instantly. Dr. Helen Wade worked frantically in the Liberty's research lab alongside 3 Toral scientists. They had found references to the ancient war against the Scorn. The old texts described a weakness. The Scorn were a hive mind, controlled by queen ships that coordinated the entire fleet. Kill the queens and the rest would fall into chaos. But the queens will be heavily protected, one of the Toral scientists pointed out. Getting close enough to attack them will cost hundreds of ships. Then we make it worth the cost, Helen said. She had developed a biological weapon, a virus that would disrupt the Scorn's cellular structure. It had to be delivered directly into a queen ship. It was a suicide mission. She had known that from the start. The Scorn fleet arrived exactly when predicted. The sensors lit up with contacts. Not hundreds of ships, not thousands, tens of thousands. The Scorn fleet filled space like a dark cloud, blotting out the stars. Their ships pulsed with sickly purple energy. They didn't bother with formations or tactics. They simply came forward, a tide of hunger and death. All ships engage, Admiral Cross ordered. The first battle was a disaster. The Council fleet fired every weapon they had. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic rounds. The Scorn ships absorbed it all. Their organic hulls regenerated damage faster than the Council could inflict it. Where Council ships died from a few hits, Scorn vessels kept coming even when torn in half. Within the first hour, the Council lost 50 ships. The fleet began to fall back, the careful formations dissolving into panic. This isn't working. Admiral Telmara projected, his mental voice strained. We need a new strategy. Lisa Grant had an idea. A terrible, risky, completely insane idea. But that was her specialty. We're fighting them like a traditional fleet. Big ships against big ships. That's what they expect. We need to change the game. She proposed splitting the fleet into small, independent task forces. Each group would include ships from multiple species. They would act without central command, choosing their own targets and tactics. Every military doctrine in Council history said this was madness. An army without coordination was just a mob. The Scorn are a hive mind, Lisa argued. They think as one. They expect us to do the same. When we act unpredictably, independently, they can't counter all of us at once. The Zephyron commanders objected. The Toral scholars said it violated every principle of warfare. But Admiral Telmara, whose mind could feel the flow of the battle, understood what Lisa meant. We're losing the traditional fight. We must try something new. Admiral Cross gave the order. The fleet scattered into 50 groups, each commanded by officers from different species. They stopped trying to hold a line and started moving like guerrilla fighters. They hit the Scorn from unexpected angles. They targeted specific systems. They worked together in ways that made no sense to a hive mind. The tide began to turn. Not much, not enough, but it turned. Sergeant Paul Bennett commanded a boarding team that included Krathnoon warriors, Velkari technicians, and human marines. Their mission was to plant Helen's biological weapon on a Scorn Queen ship. It was the most dangerous assignment in the fleet. Every person who volunteered knew they probably wouldn't come back. They approached the Queen ship in a small stealth shuttle, dodging between the larger vessels. The Scorn detected them at the last moment, but by then it was too late. The shuttle crashed through the Queen's organic hull and Paul's team poured out. The inside of a Scorn ship was like being inside a living creature. The walls pulsed. The air was thick and wrong. Scorn warriors materialized from the shadows, their forms shifting between solid and energy. The boarding team fought through them. A Krath-Noon warrior named Torvald took a hit that should have killed him. He kept fighting anyway, his massive fists crushing Scorn warriors. The Krath-Noon do not die easily. He roared. A Velkari named Shenka used her telepathy to sense where the Scorn would attack next, warning the team seconds before each strike. A human Marine named Danny Cooper carried the biological weapon, protecting it with his life. They reached the Queen's central chamber. The Queen itself was massive, a pulsing mass of organic tissue that filled the entire space. Paul armed the weapon, but before they could plant it, Scorn warriors swarmed them. The team formed a circle, backs together, fighting desperately. "We need more time," Danny shouted. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication channel. "Then you'll get it. All ships converge on Paul's position. Give them cover." 20 ships, human and alien alike, dove toward the Queen ship. They fired everything they had, drawing the Scorn's attention. Jake's fighter led the charge. His shields failed. His hull began to crack. But he kept going. In the Queen's chamber, Paul planted the weapon. "It's done. 30 seconds until detonation." "Then we need to leave," Torvald said. "No time," Paul replied, looking at the distance to the shuttle. They had gotten deep into the ship, too deep. "We won't make it." "Then we stay," Shenka projected calmly. "We ensure it works." The team stood around the weapon, protecting it as Scorn warriors tried to reach it. They held their position for 30 seconds, the longest 30 seconds of their lives. Then the weapon detonated. The biological virus spread through the Queen ship like fire. The Queen screamed, a sound that carried across space telepathically, felt by every Velkari in the fleet. The ship began to dissolve. Paul's team never had a chance to escape. They died knowing they had completed the mission. The Scorn fleet faltered. Without the Queen's coordination, thousands of ships suddenly lost direction. They drifted. They collided with each other. The hive mind was broken. "All ships, press the attack," Admiral Cross ordered. But Lisa knew it wasn't enough. The Scorn had multiple Queen ships. They needed to hit more. She led her squadron toward another Queen, using the same tactics Paul had used. Other squadrons did the same. It became a race. Could they destroy the Queens before the Scorn adapted? Helen Wade watched from the Liberty as her weapon proved its worth. Each Queen that fell caused a cascade of chaos in the Scorn fleet. But the cost was brutal. Every boarding team that planted a weapon died. Every squadron that covered them lost ships. Dr. Sophie Chen worked in the medical bay, treating the wounded as they were brought in. Humans, Velkari, Zephyrons, all bleeding together. She saw a young Ashiri pilot with shattered wings. She saw a Krath-Noon warrior missing an arm. She saw a human engineer with burns covering half his body. They all had the same look in their eyes. Determination. They would keep fighting. Captain Jake Morrison planted the final weapon personally. His ship was damaged beyond repair. His crew dead except for Sam Carter. They crashed into the last Queen ship together. Sam armed the weapon while